Good afternoon. I'm David Smiley, the Assistant Director of the Urban Design Program here at Columbia GSAPP. And I'd like to welcome you to our webinar and to help you learn about our school and our program and to hopefully get to some of the questions that you've submitted online and to show you kind of what we do on a daily basis and how the program works and who you might meet and what kinds of things you might study. So on your screen right now, you see kind of the first day of school, about June 1st or so, where the students kind of start visiting the 5 boroughs. New York is an exciting place, and that's where we're based, and this is where we start, and the kind of we grapple with the city's many problems. It's not just great skyscrapers in Midtown, but there's all sorts of conditions in New York, and so it's a great way to start to learn about cities and urban design, and this is the students kind of bewildered looking around, like, this is New York? You know, there's a canal, there's pollution, it smells funny, but it's beautiful, there's bridges. So we hope, and in the distance you can see the Empire State Building, so that's always a good reference point. The important thing is that you come here and you're immersed immediately in a very intense program. I'm sure that the students here will tell you, you work pretty hard pretty much all the time. We do want you to sleep, but for the most part, we want you to be in New York and love New York, especially at the start. So just so we get some things straight, it's a 3-semester program, starts in the summer, fall, and then spring. There are some breaks in there. There's some travel in there. And we focus on urban design, but we don't necessarily focus only on cities. In fact, it's very important that for you to understand that we look at cities and regions, we look at agricultural regions, rural areas, water systems. In fact, for us, this urban, or more appropriately, urbanization, is a kind of process of change that all places are undergoing at any given moment, whether it be in a swamp or on a street somewhere or in a factory. There's always change underway, and it's our goal to kind of learn about that change and to help you embrace that change and the people who participate in that change and the people who are affected by those changes. So we focus on collectives, we focus on shared ways of life, we focus on how people and systems and species and ecologies and infrastructures relate and how they come together and how sometimes they don't come together very smoothly, how their historical relations have been problematic. So we really try to expose you to the dynamic that is the process of collective social life, not just cities. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of what takes place in our program. And this is a diagram you'll see several times if you come to the open house or if you see Kate lecture later on in the process. You will realize how much information and how much learning we're trying to help you with and learn for ourselves as well. So very quickly, or not so quickly, quickly enough I hope, the first semester is in the summer. You arrive and we focus on the 5 boroughs of New York, not just Midtown. So you look at housing, employment, you look at infrastructure, you look at policies that are really taking place in all the 5 boroughs of the city. Some of them don't look like cities at all. They look like suburban neighborhoods or they look like rural neighborhoods. But to get to know New York is one of the intense summer experiences. And we have several classes that I'll mention later that amplify the studio experience of you getting out there. And during that time, as you can see from the bottom of my image here, we're talking and working with you on different softwares, learning how to kind of talk to people, literally interview people and get to know them and understand their concerns. And in fact, part of what we do is to record those and make small films about them. We try to understand how people relate to the city and how they relate to the changes that they can actually participate in. So we also talk about site conditions and site problems at a very small scale, at a very large scale, and this is programmed throughout the program. And we, try to kind of learn different ways of doing things, large and small scale, experiential, abstract, and these things will carry through. We call them tools and methods, and that carries through the whole year. In the second semester, in the fall, we shift to what we call the regional scale, and we conduct analyses around the country for different valley and water and regional systems. And then we focus the studio on the Hudson Valley. So the Hudson Valley, geographically, is what extends up the Hudson River from New York City, several hundred miles. It's a huge catchment area of population, of economies, of industries, of small towns, large towns. So we focus on a kind of larger scale of intervention and understanding. So policies are regional policies. Community engagement could be in several cities. It could be engagement with a land conservancy that's trying to preserve farmland. It could be a kind of an agency that regulates schools in a particular county. So the Hudson Valley as a region is a very complex entity, and so in the fall, we expand our reach, and we ask you to look not just in particular places, but also their regions and their connections out from the city centers. In some ways, they're almost always still connected to New York City, but it's very easy to move away from the regional economy and look more towards specific questions about one city or another. And once again, all along, we're learning about listening to people, working with community organizations, trying to figure out new ways of revising existing conditions, not just making new things, working with neighborhood groups, or working with trying to fix very particular problems in particular areas. In the third semester, in the spring semester, we call it mega region, we call it the global region, depending on where we are at any given moment. But that is when you start the semester by international travel. So our students usually we split the studio in half, and you'll go to one of two places. So we've been to several cities in India, several cities in the Middle East, several cities in South America, and these things are kind of always changing and growing. It all depends upon the relationships that we have with other faculty and other universities. So most recently, the students have been in India well, they're headed in a few weeks to Pune, India, and this year the spring travel, also the other half is going to Vietnam to study the Delta region. So as you can see, we really try to get the students to look at vast landscapes, vast questions of climate, the relationship between planning and policy and how they relate to informality and private initiative and public initiative. We look at how regional conflicts and immigration and kind of investment problems create large-scale changes and problems. And yet at the same time, we always focus. We always zero in on particular places, particular problems, and very material sets of relations. And all the time developing your software capacities, your capacity to tell a story, both visually and in writing and in presentation. And so that is the 3 semesters. And you can always send us emails, of course, if you have further questions. The last category there is kind of in parentheses, but it's a developing area of the program where we're really focusing on workshops and collaborations while you're a student here outside of the studio, or even after you've finished your study. And you'll see in red, something I'll mention later, HVI is the Hudson Valley Initiative, a project we initiated just a few years ago to further deepen our connections to the Hudson Valley, because in ways that's our backyard. And I'll mention that again. And then CRCL is a new research project undertaken by Kate Orff, our director, the Center for Resilient Cities and Landscapes. This is a new initiative where Kate and her staff are actually helping cities and regions around the world kind of evaluate the resiliency and climate change plans. It's really exciting, really kind of a new, a deep question, of course. And so we are working on that. And those two programs have opportunities for students to work. They help us form our studio problems. They help us meet other people in the field who end up coming to the studio or give lectures. So they're kind of our commitment to research and application of research beyond the specific semester by semester of the program. So they're very important to us in the long term. So I'm going to do a kind of quick tour of the 3 semesters, just so you can get a sense of sort of what we're about. So in the summer studio, excuse me, as I mentioned, we look at the city and the systems of the city. So this is just a diagram of various distribution and production systems of a group of students who've kind of trying to figure out a system that could be addressed somehow, or a system that actually is under stress for some reason. Our students look a lot at kind of ecology and pollution problems and local agriculture and waste issues. So here's a study for a kind of new digester program that the students began to initiate. We experiment also, we ask the students to think about new forms of engagement and new forms of representation. How do you draw engagement? How do you draw experience? And that's an ancient architectural problem, of course. And so these are just 2 projects that are trying to convey a story about a material, about a place, about a project intervention. So one of them quite literally tells you there's a ramp and a skate park and other things. So there's a kind of recreational program. The other is more of an environmental study, but made into a kind of public space. But always, we're committed to the realities of places and to the realities of talking to people. And not just talking to people, but kind of creating what we call interactions or engagements. So on the left is a typical street in Queens with the elevated train. And we want to understand what's going on there. We don't want to bulldoze it. We don't want to build 10, 20, 30-story buildings on top of it. We want to kind of engage and see what their issues are, as well as grow and change in some other way. On the right, you see a picture of one of our interactions where our students kind of often make kind of games or participation events where they can help people start talking. And the students can learn from the people who come and stop by. And in exchange, also, the people who come and stop by talk to us and hear about what's going on in their neighborhoods that they might not actually know about, or they kind of see maps of their neighborhoods, or they see new pressures in their neighborhoods. So it's very important in urban design that all through our design process, there is that continued finding of people to learn from, finding partners, finding groups who need to be part of changes in the city. We really believe very firmly in that kind of collaborative approach. And that's also, I should mention, the collaborative approach is something we do in the studio as well. As I'm sure the students will have something to tell you about. All work is group work. We're always working in groups, and even the faculty work in groups. So a desk crit will be 6 students, 4 students, and 2 faculty. And it's a discussion. You know, we look at drawings, we talk about precedents, we talk about problems. And I learn not just from the students, but with my co-faculty member. And so it's actually an incredible discussion about learning to speak, learning to present, learning to draw your ideas, and learning to kind of create a narrative in a group format, which in many ways is much closer to how practice works, especially at the large scale. In the fall, we're switching now to the fall semester. As I mentioned, we look at the Hudson River Valley. So on the left, you see an image which you probably can't make out all that well, but it's a map not just of the water system, but also the electrical power lines and the way in which they intersect with the landscape and trails. And so students begin to understand landscape not just as the planting of grass or bushes, but as the experience of the ground plane above the ground plane and below the ground plane, and the interaction of water and plant growth and human interaction and urbanization. And this project went on to develop some specific things, but it's a good kind of regional scale drawing. In the middle is a drawing of students by students who worked in Newburgh, and they kind of created a network through the existing fabric of the city to create new sets of programs. So we deal a lot with like what's there, what are the problems that currently exist, and how can we amplify responses, how can we help grow possibilities that are already in place. And also you'll notice that the drawing itself is a kind of an attempt by the students to create a communicative medium, not just like this is what you do, but a kind of drawing that explains through its visual organization. On the right is actually a project from Poughkeepsie, New York, also in the Hudson Valley. And it's a bit of a game. They developed a game about educating students with respect to agriculture and gardening, and they developed an app for the project, and in some ways were inventive in not just what we might call the project, but how people might engage the project in different ways. Again, we're always inventing ways for students and faculty and community residents and community organizations to talk and to exchange views and to learn from each other. So here's a simple interaction where a plexiglass screen with a few words on it became a site where people could rethink their own experience and their own streets. We also get our students to make stuff, as I mentioned, that are interventions in a place. This is actually a few years ago where the students used yarn to make a movie screen, and it was an incredible project in Newburgh. And then finally, in the fall, we kind of get students to think about the multiple ways in which urban design can be represented and can be integrated into the conditions of a place. So here is a really nice representation, not just of what should happen, but also perhaps who might make it happen. We're very interested not just in saying, you know, here's a thing that should be built, but we look at who's going to build it, why are they going to build it, who's going to be talked to in order to get it built. So in this case, there's talking about private money, public money, different colleges, different schools, and we stress a lot on this idea of a partner. All of our projects have partners, not handshake like I'm your partner, but a partner in the sense of someone that, or a group or several groups that you work with periodically to kind of learn about the place, about the needs, about the programming. So, and then of course, we like to get out and see the place, and this is, the students walked a stream in Poughkeepsie that is kind of unknown to half the city, and yet it's not that polluted, but a dangerous flood condition possible there. So we get the students, you know, and then they talk with other students who are trying to maintain this, this stream. And so it's a kind of interaction where we really stress being out there and looking at what's going on and continually checking in with our partners so we can check ourselves. In the spring, as I mentioned, we travel. And so here you can see, this is a drawing, I think it's in Amman, and looking at water systems, looking at climate change, looking at, in this case, the lack of water or the management of water in a fairly dense city. So this is an example where we're trying to see how urban life is essentially connected in some way to the kind of infrastructure systems that are deeply under stress in our own time from climate change, but actually are under stress in a much longer arc because of modernization and industrialization, where traditional techniques, let's say, of water distribution are discarded for pumps, which then themselves become a problem in terms of pollution, in terms of cost. So this is an engagement with the older water system and turning it into something new for the city. Here in India, the students were looking at redistributing water and trying to help clean water and try to help the local industries on the water to maintain themselves and to grow, and fruit markets and vegetables and other kinds of markets are woven into a kind of new fabric of kind of land management and water management. And the drawings are a way to kind of get beyond a typical plan or a typical elevation, but to kind of express both a sense of space, but also a kind of sense of excitement or interest. So we're really trying to think through how we tell others about the city and how cities might change. We do plenty of diagramming and analyses. On the left is the mapping of historic wells in one city. On the right is a kind of a diagram of the yearly rituals of planting and the use of the land and the production of materials. So the students do a lot of analysis work, a lot of diagramming, because they're looking at vast systems. And so we spend a lot of time kind of trying to figure out how to organize in our own heads how to approach a particular problem or place. Here's a series of projects proposed along a river in which each one is very specific, and you might not be able to make each one out, but generated by a particular characteristic of a place or a particular stress point in a place. This in India is the repurposing of an old water system that had been abandoned and polluted, and now the city is realizing, oh, we need to reclaim this water because it was cleaned somewhat through natural systems. It actually could become a community space. And so the students engaged in a kind of rethinking of a large body of water within a city. As I mentioned, like I said, these are all travel, and so there's some good times, amazing sights. Students often take a few extra days. The travel is usually in January before school starts, so the travel is a real perk towards the end of their 3 semesters here. Excuse me. So a couple of other points that I wanted to mention. It's not just studio, as I'm sure you know. We have required classes, we have elective classes, both in the School of Architecture as well as in the university. So in the summer, you'll take a class called Reading New York Urbanisms, and you'll learn to talk to people and film them and create a story. It's a much-loved class because students realize that the language of architecture or the language of urbanism is not a kind of given. People need to learn to communicate, and we stress that a lot. And so some of the movies that the students make are hilarious, some of them are heartbreaking, and that's what we want people to be able to do, to actually get past the kind of immediate logics and learn to tell a story that will engage people. And we stress that a lot during the program. And on the right, you see an image of one of our conferences. We call it the Storytelling Conference, where we invite students as well as professionals to kind of share some of their work. And it's always fascinating. We have animations, we have people who do still photography and edit them into other kinds of pieces. We have game designers who use film. So it's a fall opportunity to continue to learn to use digital tools in thinking about cities and urban process. So as I mentioned, there are 2 research projects that we do that complement the program and have opportunities for students to work or sometimes outside of class and also in partnerships with different communities. The Hudson Valley Initiative is a kind of outgrowth of our fall studio, but now it's a separate entity where the director, Kaya Kuhl, is working with communities directly and helping them plan a recreational facility around a lake up in the valley, or working with another city to plan a small park. And students participate in different ways there. And you can see we also have other faculty from not just urban design, but from the architecture school in general. So this is a really fascinating thing that's growing very nicely right now. And finally, Kate Orff is the director as well of the UD program, but also of the Center for Resilient Cities and Landscapes. And as I mentioned, they help other cities around the world evaluate their own plans for climate change, essentially. So last Christmas, I think they went to Madagascar? No, perhaps. I may have that wrong, but they actually helped a community and the government evaluate plans for the coming of oil fields and the changes wrought by climate. So the center is actually engaged directly with organizations around the world trying to figure out how to not just intervene, but how to even plan the process of intervening. So it's a great program, and one of our graduates now works there, and the places that we travel in the spring are usually connected through the center as well. So we're trying to build on our studio work to create more research and more opportunities for those of you coming into the program. And of course, there's studio culture itself. I'm sure you know already, if you're an architect, that studio culture is a kind of life unto itself. We try to make it, as I mentioned, extremely collaborative. You'll see here students presenting to one group of reviewers, then they'll present to another group of reviewers, and there's a kind of dialogue. It's not a kind of right and wrong. It's more about how students develop their positions to a whole bunch of different professionals. So sometimes in the fall, we'll have 50 professionals from different disciplines come and work with the students over the course of a day. And so this could be the third or fourth time that in this image that a student group is discussing some of their work. So our idea about collaboration and co-production is not just with communities, but even with our own design process. So it's really important that the studio culture is intense, but it's also very much about students and faculty and professionals and other disciplines working together. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to some of our alums and some of our current students. I think I hit the wrong button. At any rate, so we're going to start with Ashley, and she's going to tell you about herself and a little bit about the program. And Ashley and Richard are current students in the program, and then Jesse and Betsy are alumni. So hopefully they'll get to some of your questions, and then we'll have, I'll sit down afterwards and we'll continue the conversation because I have some specific answers to some of your questions. So thank you.
Thanks, David. My name is Ashley. I have a background in architecture. I did a 5-year degree at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles. And after I graduated, I worked in San Francisco for 2.5 years doing architecture and interiors. I would say working added a lot of assets to what I bring to who I am today at GSAPP. And I got exposed to some public-private partnerships between the relationship of the developer and the architect. And I was really interested in exploring these public spaces when I came to GSAPP. And my interest in urban design and urbanism started when I studied abroad. In my undergraduate, I did a program where I went to Tokyo and Shanghai, and I got exposed to urban design. And I would say when I came here, it was getting immersed in this systems thinking and participatory design, community engagement. It's been a really great experience, and everything that I hoped to learn, I've found an avenue for that here. I have a strong interest in visual studies, and one of the greatest assets about being at GSAPP is being able to take all of the choices of electives that they have here. And in the fall, it was really hard to decide on 2 or 3 electives, but I narrowed it down, and I'm currently pursuing 3.5 different research projects and very busy right now with studio and everything. I was a little bit nervous about working with teams when I initially came here, but I've learned so much from my peers just because they come from different backgrounds. It's really diverse. There's so much that you don't know and that your teammates can help you with, that it's just such a great asset. And I really like being at GSAPP because the networking connections through the career services is really great. I got paired with a mentor, and they have a really awesome portfolio review. So as I prepare to apply for jobs in the spring, I have the guidance available to me. Like, I can reach out to different alumni and ask for advice in my next steps.
Great, that was awesome. Hi, my name is Richard. I was born in Taiwan and I grew up in Vancouver. I studied my BArch at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh. And after that, I worked at Canon Design in Baltimore. We focused on healthcare and education projects. Throughout my studies, I was very interested in computational design, and I think I took that on with me when I started working. And what I realized that from working in a architectural firm is that once you're beyond school, you're working with a lot of stakeholders. And in my experience, for example, I work with a lot of subject matter experts. Since my emphasis was on technology and computational design, I was trying to work with not only users, but also designers as well as healthcare planners. And all that together kind of informed my interest, which led to urban design today, which is what I think is really inspiring is that I'm studying everything that's about the impact of architecture and what is the broader reach of our profession. So that led me to GSAPP, and again here there is a lot of emphasis on not only researching high-level topics, looking into some very intricate relationships in cities and regions, but also creating local impacts. So in the summer semester that Ashley and I were in, we engaged with local communities in New York City, and these are people that I never imagined to have met and to develop a relationship with, and it really gave me a lot of respect for these people, because these are people that are truly passionate about their neighborhood, their environment, and their city. And as an aspired urban designer, what I think is the key to my career is, how do I use my profession to help these people? And I think that ties into the belief of GSAPP as a whole. What I love and why I chose GSAPP is because I think here we are taught to develop our own interests, but also to have an agenda with it. I remember very clearly the very first day of my semester, our semester director, Kaya, told us that but at the end of this program, we want you to become activists in the sense that we want you to take your skills, go on to wherever you end up with, and create an impact. And I think that's something I carry to this day. Like Ashley says, there's a lot of opportunity to take different classes, and there are also a lot of research opportunities, and personally, that's what I was very interested in when I came here. So there are a lot of, so aside from classes, there are ways for you to engage with other centers. So the centers that David mentioned before are always, they have this open door policy and you don't just have to want to work for them, but if you have any questions and advices that you're looking for, you can always go to them. And I find myself reaching out to a lot of these resources at GSAPP. These are knowledges that I would never have attained on my own. So overall, I think this program really enriched not only my profession, but also my mission. And I think, it's an experience of a lifetime.
Oh, that was great. I'm Betsy. I'm actually graduated with Jesse this past May. Along with these two other students, I graduated with an architecture degree from Syracuse. And I guess when I started working for about 3 years, and the place that I was working at was really doing kind of high-end residential work. And I knew in the back of my mind, I always wanted to go back to school. The timing was always up in the air, but really what drove me to this program and to urban design in general was some of the experiences I had as an undergrad, and that, you know, architecture ends up being this kind of solo project, and I really liked what urban design could become as a more encapsulating, systematic, infrastructural type of design and thought process. And even like my thesis project during my undergrad wasn't an architecture project. It was like this big infrastructural system, temporal system in Mumbai. And so all these things that I've studied and researched came back to me, and I was like, okay, let's go back to school and see what a degree can actually do. And a lot of the reasons that Richard and April talked about why they chose GSAPP also hold true, that it is a collaborative process, and also because I think the network that New York City has and its ability to reach all these different organizations that Columbia itself works with is another draw for me. And I really liked particularly some of the output, the drawings, the representation that Columbia had, that some other programs had. And it's actually the only school I applied to, because I was like, if I want to go back to school, I want to go here. So it worked out definitely in the end. In general, this whole 3 semesters will go by much the fastest you ever will think. I can't believe we're already 6 months out from graduation. But I think the amount of work and the amount of complexity and the richness in the projects over the 3 semesters will add to your portfolio and also add to your thinking. And I think the amount of work that I did is kind of surpasses any of the work that I did in my undergrad, and it's just a great experience in general. And I think I came in with a certain amount of agenda, but I definitely broadened it to what urban design could be, and I think coming in with an open mind, it will definitely help. And I guess to speak on to what I've been doing for the past 6 months, after I graduated, I knew I wanted to work somewhere in the private sector for a little bit more, at least, and somewhere bigger. I didn't really need I didn't have like a particular time frame to get a job, because I was like, okay, I needed time to kind of figure out what I wanted. I ended up doing, as David mentioned, a research scholar for the Hudson Valley Initiative for the summer, so that kept me pretty occupied. So right now I'm working, I just started working since this past September at HOK in their urban design and planning department, and it's been pretty good. What else? And then, but I think overall, I think I'm excited to see of all the skills that I've learned the past year and to kind of expand that into the working field.
Cool, thanks. I'm Jesse. I also graduated last year with Betsy, or 6 months ago, not last year. But I am from Los Angeles, California. I was born and raised from that area, from Southern California. I initially started as a music performer for the first 3 to 4 years out of high school. And then that's when I ended up going back to undergrad, or starting undergrad, and doing a landscape architecture degree at Cal Poly Pomona. And after the program there, I worked at a landscape design office. I worked in 2 different firms in Southern California for about 3 to 4 years. And yeah, and then that's around that time is when I always knew I wanted to go back to school. I always knew I wanted to get a master's degree. And whether it was in landscape architecture or something else, at my time working as a landscape designer, I was working on master planning and a lot of public parks in California. And so after doing that for a few years, it kind of encouraged me to lean towards urban design. And after trying to figure out what I wanted to focus within urban design, I started to just kind of dig back into my undergrad and what I thought about in school in design. And I kind of found Columbia because in landscape architecture, I was following Kate Orff actually at the time, and she was all about a lot of the social and ecological injustice design, and so knowing that, I found out she had just become the dean at Columbia, so that was kind of a major inspiration for me to figure out what else Columbia has to offer in terms of design. So they had an open house in the fall, and I ended up going to that open house, and after that open house, I was kind of sold, like, okay, I think this is what I'm gonna apply to the school in the next year or two. And I think what kind of made me choose Columbia over the other schools was the fact that it's a one-year program. It kind of was a little intriguing. I knew I didn't want to go to school that much longer, but I knew I wanted to get a master's degree. That was one, and then another thing was just the focus. The focus that Columbia had was a lot of this social and ecological injustice theme that I found value in, and I knew that Columbia kind of was going to allow me to focus on that. And especially with, I know like David had said earlier, the three scales, kind of starting the summer in New York, and then the fall doing an American city on a regional scale, and then the spring semester allowed us to travel, whether, at the time we didn't know where we were going to go, but we knew we were going to go somewhere global. And being kind of born and raised in Los Angeles and then coming to New York, going somewhere else would sounded really intriguing. Yeah, so that was kind of the reason why I ended up picking Columbia. How the year went? The year went really quickly. Kind of like Betsy said, it flew by. It was probably the most intense thing I've thought I've ever done. Like, I thought undergrad was hard, but yeah, this was definitely a little bit more difficult. And not just in terms of like hard work or intensity of hours, where that's going to come with it, but I think kind of like what Ashley had said earlier, I definitely kind of feared the idea that everything was teamwork. I was like, oh no. I was a little worried about that, but I had done that, professionally, but it was with other landscape architects. So I think the greatest thing one of the greatest things I enjoyed that I generally had fun with was that teamwork that we had, those being with 3 or 4 other individuals that were completely different backgrounds. I think out of all the teams I worked with, I might have been like the only one from California. Like everyone else was from either India or Korea or Japan or China, Chile. So it was really cool just to have that multiverse team, and especially with different strengths. I didn't have a background in architecture. I didn't have a background in that. So working so closely on an urban design project with an architect, I feel like as a team, you create things that you never thought you could create. And when you can trust your teammates and they can trust you and you have that respect, it's kind of crazy what you can do. What else? I think currently to speak on, since I graduated in the last 6 months, the career services department here is really helpful. I threw myself at it, and I tried to talk to as many people as I can and network as much as I can. And by a month before getting out of school, I had interviewed and I had already locked down a job coming out of graduation at the New York City Department of City Planning in the Urban Design Division. I felt very lucky to be offered that opportunity. But that kind of rooted a lot with this idea that I wanted to continue this social and ecological injustice design and have that focus on that. And I feel like within the public sector, at least in New York City, I'm given that opportunity, especially, which kind of continues with what I hope to do with this degree and what I hope to do in the future with urban design. Is there's such a big emphasis here, or at least what I thought, what I took big about was the community engagement part. Especially summer and the fall, we are thrown out, actually, yeah, spring too, we are thrown out into the cities and forced to talk to people. And I think for a lot of people, a lot of students actually, they don't get that opportunity as much in undergrad. And and so that kind of was really exciting for me, and I wanted to continue that. And so in the public sector, there's a lot of opportunities for me to explore with different medias about how to present, these complex, unseen and seen systems within the city, and I get to explore with that. And so something with Columbia and I'm doing in city planning, whether we're making interesting diagrams, making animations, making videos, talking in front of people, and I think the best thing I thought was amazing with community engagement is when you make something and you want to present it to a bunch of people or the public that have no idea what design is, and that reaction, the first reaction might be like they don't even know what you're talking about, and you're like, oh, okay, back to the drawing board. Like they did not understand what I worked a lot on. So then you go back and you do it again, and and that process is very apparent at Columbia, and we get to work on that in urban design here. And the faculty really pushes us to define our own success. I think that was something I really enjoyed, was like, sure, we can make these cool drawings, sure, we can have an intense design, but the freedom they give us is, are we defining our own success and are we achieving it? And I really hope to continue that process in my future of urban design, and I hope to eventually continue that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank all of you. So in the remaining time, I'm going to fill in a few bits and pieces, and the students and former students may have some bits to add. I think one question that comes up is like, what exactly will I be doing? So I will tell you, in the summer, you arrive and all the courses you take, we tell you what to take. So you have to take studio, a class on softwares, a class on what we call reading New York urbanism, which is storytelling and media, and a history and theory of 20th century urbanism. So in the first semester, the summer semester, it's very intense, and you are basically giving a kind of, excuse the expression, a boot camp introduction to urban issues, urban representation, and urban thinking. Or I should say urbanization, because it's not always in the cities. And so in the fall semester, you have to take the studio, and the spring semester, you have to take the studio. In the fall semester, you also have to take one required seminar and one elective class. In the spring, you have to take another required seminar, and everything else is up to you. So it could be in the fall and spring, 1 or 2 or even 3 classes elsewhere at the architecture school or even at the university. I can't stress enough how wonderful GSAPP is and the university is for offering classes in policy, in economics, in anthropology, in any language, and it's open to you. So be ready to work, no kidding, but the requirements we feel are actually pretty doable. Although, of course, as you know, studio will take any time you give it, so you have to learn to balance your education and your life and your sleeping and the kinds of things that you do. The second thing I want to mention also is career services. There is a great system here, but most of it is also up to you. So you don't think about it when you first get here, which is probably a good thing in the first semester, but you need to learn to talk to people. So on your reviews, you will have lots of interaction because our reviews are huge with professionals from all over the world. Find out about them, work and talk to them. So we do a lot to help our graduates, but it's also something, I mean, GSAPP is very committed to you getting a job, but we also need to know that you are taking initiative, and that's something important because it's only 3 semesters, and like everyone is saying, it's fast. Another question I'm embarrassed to say I have very little to say on, which is what about the portfolio? Honestly, show us your best work. Not everything, just show us really good work that tells us who you are. I'm not going to say anything more. Another bit of information that people were asking about has to do with jobs, internships, and things like that. And some of those things I can comment on, other things go through the admissions people. But we do offer, you can apply while you're here in the summer to be a teaching assistant or other intern. And so in the summer, there's really the time for you to kind of learn what's available for your fall and spring semesters. And at the school and in urban design, there are various options. But there's no guarantees, and we do the best we can to find places for people. You know, there's a lot of talk about group work. And as I stressed, and as everyone stressed, that you kind of learn to love and hate and everything in between your group. It changes. It's not just one group all semester. So, you know, and there is some flexibility. So it's not a prison sentence. But in fact, it's a lot of fun. Now, the flip side of that is, well, what about my own work? What about my own ideas? Our goal is for you, and the reason we will accept you is because we see evidence of your own capacity to think and to draw and to represent your ideas. We know you're good if you're here, but the real test is how you can work with others. We may all be geniuses, but we all have to work with everyone else. And so that is, we stress that people should, push their own ideas, draw their own ideas, show us, and get ready to debate them, get ready to talk about them, both to your peers and to the faculty and to reviewers. So it's a really important kind of positive tension between your own agenda, as Richard put it, and the idea that you have to work with others pretty much all the time. So it's a really fascinating thing to watch, and over the years I've been teaching it, it's just always fulfilling to watch students work together and to give themselves crits, not just expect me to give one, and to develop their own programs together. One other question, this is kind of similar, the dynamic of the studio. We are actually moving to a new space, just a few yards from this very room, that's going to be devoted to urban design. So when you arrive, it'll be new, the paint will be fresh, and everything will work perfectly, and it's going to be very exciting. It even has windows, and air conditioning. So we're very excited, and what's great about that is that there's a lot of noise and a lot of back and forth and a lot of talk because you're working in groups. So the studio is always kind of electric, and it's really great. Many architecture studios are like that as well, of course. You've been in architecture school, and you understand the collective experience of the studio. And I just want to say that we kind of, we work with that and hopefully pump it up even more. One other question that comes up, several people's questions had to do with the relationship of urban design to urban planning and to policy. There is a great planning program here, but we are designers, we're architects first, and it's important that we learn about visualization and representation and space making as constitutive of our experience in the city, on the farm, and everywhere in between. We ask our students to do a considerable amount of policy research and contextual research into systems, into regulatory agencies, into political boundaries, into jurisdictional boundaries. We don't pretend to be planners. We have some of our teachers some of our faculty are planners, in fact. So you get a lot of feedback. So when I say that we teach in groups, in the fall studio right now, there's 6 faculty, 2 have a planning background, 2 have an architecture background, 1 has a landscape background. So we actually bring some of that policy and other forms of expertise into the studio environment. It's not just architects or urban designers. I myself am an architect and a historian, and I teach in the studio. So there's a great mix. The last thing I'll say is someone asked about sustainability, and it's kind of like the elephant in the room: sustainability, resilience, climate change. And every year, it's apparent that we have to take this on in a much more serious way. At the same time, we interrogate what resilience is. We don't just say resilience is X, Y, or Z. Resilience is a political fact, not just a social need. So what is resilience or what is sustainability are actually questions. They're not actually automatically a policy of one sort or another. So we encourage our students to test out in their designs, well, what do you mean by this water is recycled? For whom is it recycled? Who decides what this thing is going to be? Who needs to be in the room? So for us, sustainability and resilience are social and political questions, not just physical questions. I think that's where we kind of overlap with planning and policy fields, and we kind of move away from the pure design field. So for us, when we talk about infrastructure, for instance, we're talking about social infrastructure, not just a sewer line, but we're talking about everybody who's involved with that. And it could even be, microbe species who's involved with that we need to study. So it's a very complex environment that we all try to engage with. So in closing, I want to ask if the students have anything else they'd like to add, if they have a second thought or a third thought.
I have something to add about like software and stuff. When I came here, I knew Rhino, Adobe Creative Suite, AutoCAD, Revit, SketchUp, but what I thought was great that they teach here is the video element. So David touched on it. It's the Reading New York Urbanisms class in the summer. And now I have skills to do animations, to create videos, and it's just another resource in the toolbox on how to communicate design. And then also talking about the interdisciplinary engagement with other planning students. So my current seminar with Kate Orff is actually paired with Thad's, a group of planning students. So half of the semester was the two seminars together with a variety of guest speakers. So you do get that opportunity to engage with students from different backgrounds if you so choose those courses.
I could probably also add, I'm looking at some of the questions that were earlier. There were some questions related to, because the degree is called Urban Design and Architecture, and even meeting some people at the open house, they were always wondering, even with, like, you know, our director of urban design being a landscape architect, I guess, and people are always wondering, you know, is it urban design, is it architecture, is it landscape architecture? And I feel that, you know, you can't really specify what urban design is specifically, I think, or in my opinion, maybe some people can. But, you know, it really what it contains on, and the program itself, you know, what will be focused on more, you know, whether it's architecture or urban design, and I feel like the faculty really pushes you to create your own thesis, you know, to create your own agenda. It's like if you're interested in, I don't know, how landscape can better heal mental health, then that's you know, that'll be something that you get to kind of focus on. You know, they're going to encourage you and they're going to help you create that thesis, and they're going to question you constantly. You know, who are the actors? Who are you going to be talking to? What's the purpose of this? Why are you doing this? Why do you care about this? So I think whether it's, you know, designing a community garden to a whole building to, you know, whatever it is, that's what urban design is, and you get to define what urban design is. And I think I didn't know what urban design was going into it, and I still don't, but I love that GSAPP was giving me the avenue to play with it and to experiment and to really just try. And, you know, the semester, you know, the summer goes by really quick, but the fall and spring are so long where, you know, one week you'll try something and then your crit may not go well, but then the next week you try something else, you know, and the professor's like, hey, this is a lot better than last week, keep going this way. You know, so I think that is really what, you know, it's not really whether it's more architecture-based or more landscape-based, it's really what you want it to be, and you get to define it as a team.
And I think, to speak on that, I think the scale of projects are kind of amazing in the sense that one semester you'll be designing like a singular house or whatever it might be, or like, and then you end up designing a whole village or a town, and so like the whole breadth of the work is kind of incredible to touch on that within a year and be right. And like, I think the greatest thing someone told me was like, come with an open mind, even if you do have an agenda, that you'll be amazed by what your landscape architect teammate might teach you or someone else, and so I think that's definitely great.
Mm. Oh, maybe you'll, I just thought of something. Like, some of that, just continuing that idea that professors are pushing you to do, you know, whatever you want. And I'm just thinking post-graduation now, it's like the professors they do have like sometimes, you know, they tend to have a set of requirements, you know, like do 3 posters of this and do this and this, you know. And however, there are times like, you know, I feel like a lot of people have asked me, how much model making did you do? And I think one time I said, I didn't do any, but then I realized quickly after you do, you know, another class will do a lot of model making, or maybe your teammate's better at model making than you are, and, you know, it'll kind of go off of that. So even though there are requirements, I feel like they allow you to explore different types of media for presentations, and that was really fun. Yeah.
I think the important thing to recognize is this is a second degree, a post-professional degree. So we encourage students who want to invent and do things on their own terms. And it's very important that if you come here, that we expect that you can, and that's why we've accepted you, and we encourage you to, you know, explore, do something new, and perhaps, you know, fail sometimes, but As a second professional degree, we assume that you're mature and you can take criticism and you enjoy criticism and you like talking about it and arguing about it and still being friendly about it, and to make our collective lives, our urban lives, or wherever they may be, better and more equitable and healthy. But it takes initiative and independence and energy and commitment. And I think we are out of time, so I look forward to seeing you in the future.